ladies. It's a little early here in California. I guess it's not too early, but I feel like it's a little early. We are going to see if find out. She's in New York, so it might take a little while to get over the pond, so to speak. Good morning. Well, I guess it's afternoon for you.
Well, noonish.
Noonish, exactly.
Noon on the dot, actually. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. I'm so grateful that you're here today.
Oh, it's really a joy. I was just looking through your site. Wow.
I know. It's a
You guys
lot.
have pulled so much information together in one place. Really beautifully done.
Thank
Good
you for
job.
saying that. Thanks. We don't sleep that much. So, it's fine. It's totally fine.
Welcome
But
to the world of entrepreneurship, right?
I know Stacey and I talk about this all the time where you have to be slightly psychotic to start your own company. Just mildly,
You
mildly.
know, I started my first company when my kids were 4, 3, and 2 because there was no way to work inside of a corporation and have your gifts manifested and still be an amazing, outrageous parent. And so it
Yeah.
was sort of you either had to be in charge or, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say this in your bio because it's ridiculous, but I also have 4 children and it's impossible. There are not enough hours in the day to actually fulfill need as partner, wife, mother, 4 children, and contributor on earth of what you want to do and build and create. It's just so entrepreneurship really becomes the only
Well, you
answer.
lose what you gain in creativity, control. You lose a lot of those positioning things that happen in a regular
Yeah.
job. Where you're like playing politics or you're going to unnecessary meetings. Like a lot of that noise goes out of the way. Commuting goes out of the way a lot of the
Yeah.
time. So yeah. Well, anyway, congratulations.
Okay.
I wanted to just tell you.
So I was going to do a little bio because I feel like setting the stage on all of the things that you are and do is amazing. And then would love to dive into the conversation that, we really want to get into today, which is, power and self-care and self-love
Great.
and all those things. So we are joined this morning by the illustrious Christine Mason, who is the founder of Rosebud Woman, which for those of you joining, if you don't know, please go check it out. And we're going to have lots of promo codes at the end today. But Rosebud is an intimate and body care line for women to really support holistic self-care and self-love and power in this midlife journey. Christine is also the host of Rose Woman podcast, which are in the top 5% worldwide, which is unbelievable. It's just incredible. So, I mean, namaste, amazing. And then if that wasn't enough, she just launched her 10th book last week.
Yeah, Monday actually. A week
Monday,
ago
yeah, she
today.
just launched casually her 10th book. It just dropped. Anyway, and it's called The 9 Lives of a Woman, Sensual, Sexual, and Reproductive Stages from Birth to 100. Unbelievable. So that's on our website. Go get that. You
Thank you.
teach yoga and tantra and healing plant medicine and intentional living, all the while having 4 children, 2 bonus children, and your grandmother.
Yes. I'm grandmother of a 12-year-old.
So there she is, folks. I mean, it's not normal. So we're so grateful to have you on here.
It sounds like a lot until you realize it's just, 58 years on Earth. You know what I mean? It just
I know
stacks
when
up
people
over
read
time.
I read the bios every time because I feel like it calibrates the women on the other
Uh,
end, kind of absorbing, I can't believe I did that. Like,
yeah.
even just hearing it feels like you did that. That's so incredible. It's unreal. Anyway,
I'm noticing I'm getting like a little choked up just at being witnessed.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, I'm here for you in Napa, California, just giving you my love.
All right. All right.
But with that, I actually,
Somebody asked what are bonus children. Oh, I love Kailu Silk. That's such a great company.
hi, Lily.
We met her at Sunrise Health's event. Bonus children are when they have an existing biological mother, but then you parent them from 2 and 8 to adulthood. And so you get to be a bonus mom, and they're your bonus children.
Yeah, I have two of those.
Yeah.
And then they're always yours. It's like this, it actually
Yeah.
is a magical relationship
It is.
in so many ways because you get to just be this bonus. You don't have to be anything else.
Yeah. I just on a total aside, but when I was coming up, like the idea of the stepmother was always positioned as this evil creature, and then we turned it into the fairy stepmother. And then that was like, I'm your fairy stepmother. How can I help you today? You know, it's a very different energy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It when you reframe it can become really powerful.
Yeah.
I found with my boys. Anyway. Okay, Rosebud Woman. Why did she begin to exist and how did you create her?
Well,
why were you inspired?
In about 2014, I was going through perimenopause and menopause myself, and I wanted to find something that would help with some moisture issues and, you know, dryness and things. And I went and found only things that were pathologized, like in the back of the CVS, you know, kind of lube central, where it's all purple and like lightning bolts, and, you know, or it was in the feminine hygiene, very whispered, like, you shouldn't need this. And I was like, this is actually just a part of my body. And I started formulating at home. I went and looked at Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, South American tribal traditions, Northern European white witch traditions around herbalism, and found, like, figuring that women had dealt with this for thousands of years, that we probably weren't alone, formulated something, you know, made the first few batches. People would come over and I'd be like, hey, this giant, like, quart bottle of, like, hey, do you want to try this? It looks like yogurt, but it's actually, you know, pussy-ceuticals. and then we ended up taking that formula to a really wonderful chemist in Los Angeles, actually, and turned it into an organic plant-based healing balm. And so that's how it started. And I put a survey out, gosh, this is so going back so far, of what were the top intimate care needs that women had, not wanting to sort of extrapolate from my own experience. And I surveyed 3,000 women. We hired a firm to do that. And they told us what their top needs were. So the first 4 products were formulated specifically for those needs. Soothe was this cooling, irritation countering lotion. Arouse was to create more sensation, which I'll tell you about that if you'd like, but we can move on for now.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, I find in my life and kind of my experiences that innovation happens on the edges, right? That innovation doesn't happen in the middle of the road. Innovation doesn't happen in aisle 7 of a CVS. Innovation happens outside those doors, and it happens because a need state is not being met. And one of the things that, you know, we find so fascinating about how you designed the products was that you brought this team of interdisciplinary people to the table and said, okay, you're a healer, you're a sociologist, you're a physician. How does your approach and your lens of the world actually impact this product development? And would love to hear how that kind of drove direction, because that's so fascinating.
Well, it's a beautiful question. I had grown up in a religious environment that shamed sexuality. And, you know, we didn't talk about any of those things, periods, much less menopause. Even a lot of the things around pregnancy and birth after I was pregnant came as a shock to me. And I realized that a lot of the things that created suffering in my own life were tied to these internalized beliefs about the body. And when I found yoga, which was heavily an embodiment practice, breath, return to yourself, you know, and then Tantra, which begins with, like, your life force is sacred, your body is holy, holy from top to bottom. All of that stuff came into the idea in creating the brand. Even the things like the glass and stuff was designed so that you could put it on your night table, leave it out overnight, and it would be treated like reverent self-practice. And a lot of the things, like, I put a lot of books out, journals. Even if you purchase the body oil, there's affirmations in there about, like, reclaiming and loving your body from head to toe. So a lot of it is really understanding that the mind and the body and the spirit and the emotional life are all integrated. They can't be separated. As much as you'd like to turn yourself into molecules and cells and organ systems, you're working on yourself in multiple layers all the time. So that's sort of the backstory behind that. I would also say that it evolved, because as I started to brand the
Mhm.
products and I went to look at names, I found all of these euphemisms, like on Urban Dictionary, for women's sexual
Right.
parts, and about 99% of them were slurs. And those slurs fell into the categories of filth or objectification,
Shame.
shame. And I was like, well, that's what's alive in the culture. So I started to realize that the normalization of the conversation around the vulva, around the vagina, all of that stuff was actually like a countering of this cultural thing that I didn't even realize how deep it was buried in the culture. So I got a little bit of a awakening to how deep it is, and that's been kind of woven into the brand since
Yeah.
2018.
I mean, that could be a whole other subject of the demonizing of women, particularly our
Yeah,
sexuality, but that is, it like makes my
yeah. So
skin crawl just
that's, so you'll
mild.
see there's like over 1,000 articles on the site
Yeah.
that kind of fall into, and 160 pod episodes now, and they kind of fall into these categories of like, here's the biological stuff that's going on,
Yeah.
here's the stuff that like might be impacting you on these other levels, but it's a very much an integrated
Yeah.
plan.
So as you have traversed this journey since you
Yeah.
began, why do you feel truly at your core that sexual self-care, this power matters for women? What was that kind of that zeitgeist that you said, okay, that matters?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
and how do we help women get there?
So I was really lucky to meet someone early on who taught me that my erotic power was an infinite well of energy. And that when we're cut off from that, you're sort of like denying one of the core forces. You could even do
Yeah.
it like right now. If you kind of like sit and ground your hip bones, and you pull your outer hips in and the front of the pelvis back toward the sacrum, and like really suck up the vaginal wall,
Yep.
and then pulse the perineum, and then bring that up to the heart. Take a big breath in and like open up, and just feel like the difference of moving in your life from that centered place. So when you begin to do sexual self-care, first of all, like the Honor Balm, the leading product, I put on there, like, for self-pleasure. The ingredients are, you put them on and they actually rebuild the tissue. It's not a lube. It's like over time the herbs
Right.
work too. But I said, do this with a self-pleasuring practice, like just every day, just kind of, explore around there, feel what it's like, learn the pressure points, get in touch with yourself, breathe that down into your body. And I experience tantra and sexual self-care like this, like a torus, that donut shape that's always
Mm-hmm.
revolving. That's like you're this infinite energy, and you're giving energy and you're receiving energy down through the body. And that by tapping into that and creating sexual self-care as a practice, that you really get to that. And it also let me, and I think a lot of our community, sort of get in touch with what actually brings you pleasure.
Yeah.
And then if you're noticing, I actually want a much slower touch than I'm getting, or a much faster touch than I'm getting. And then you can
Yeah.
communicate that and you create more mutual pleasure. So some answers.
It's so interesting. I heard Dr. Juliana Hauser speak back in November, and she said, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant, which is our sexuality is the last frontier of personal growth. And I thought that's so true. We go through so much growth, in our lives, whether it's children and then as adolescents and then as teenagers, but that
Yeah.
sexuality is this last frontier that a lot of people don't even get to. They don't even understand, to your point about pleasure or self, which ultimately is power, which is
Yeah.
so
Yes.
fascinating.
I would even distinguish between sexuality specifically and
Oh,
eroticism.
interesting.
That
Yeah.
like the whole world is quite erotic. That like even when you begin to notice how much more sensation there is between like your fingertips. Oh my God, ah. And that you start to walk in the world like slow enough that you can taste and
Yeah.
smell and receive the world around you, and that you can receive other people at this like centered, beautiful, deep level. And that is an erotic pace of living. We talked to the women in the community and said, what gets in the way of you having sexual pleasure. And they almost all said stress, like I'm too tense to relax, or pain, inflammation, like it's just too painful. My joints are in pain, or my vagina doesn't feel good. But if you can deal with uh, the the, the relaxation component by coming in and through the body, like not taking drugs or anxiety meds, but like really breathing and being able to switch in and out of an erotic unified state through your endogenous systems. I feel like that is the gateway. The erotic is the gateway to the sexual, and that there is, totally untapped power in there. In India, I study a lot of Indian religions, Eastern philosophy. They say that if sexuality is not at the center of your religion, it's a dead religion.
So interesting. Jaw drop.
That like the creative spark that happens
Right.
in that process is when you're closest to the divine. Anytime you're creating, you're closest to the divine. I was like, what?
There are other religions that seem a little bit disconnected with that sentiment.
Yeah, there
but
are a few.
That is so fascinating. Do you remember that scene in the movie The Piano?
Let's see.
Where she was playing the piano and there was a little hole in her stocking? And
I don't remember that.
Somebody will remember it.
But continue.
It was this moment where she was playing the piano and there's a little rip in her stocking and he just touches that hole on her leg. And it was the most erotic, like,
yes.
But it wasn't sexual, but it was just this moment of being present and connected.
Yeah.
You have to go see this scene. And anyway,
no,
but when you
I
were
love
saying
that.
about,
And now I want to do a movie scene back. Water for Chocolate, right? This movie where okay, so this is also one of the most sensual movies of all time. And the title comes from water for chocolate has to be simmering, but it can't boil or it will burn the chocolate. So like water for chocolate is like, it's like already like in just pure arousal that won't go over the top. And there's a scene in there where she's cooking her sister's wedding feast, but she's in love with her sister's fiance. They're in love with each other. And so she's cooking her sorrow into the food. And it's all of these, like, even sorrow at that level is like an erotic.
I have to go back and watch that movie. I haven't seen it probably since it came out, which
outrageous.
is, I don't even want to know, 20 years ago at least, right?
30. But still stays with me as one of the most erotic films of all time because of the slow pacing of the photography, the way they're inviting you into this world of emotion without being explicit. It's so beautiful.
I think it was Holly Hunter. Do you remember that? And she was on an island. Anyway.
Yes.
I'm going to send it to you.
Yes. No, on the piano. Yeah. Right.
So good.
Okay, we'll put this in a side blog. The most erotic, non-sexual movie scenes of all time.
Okay, so to that end, and I have, because I think, and you and I kind of briefly went back and forth on this, but you've talked a lot about this plant, and you've talked about Ayurvedic, and you've talked about going in, looking at other cultures, whether it's, witch cultures or South American or indigenous cultures, and the ingredients matter. Yes. And the ingredients that we put on our body, and I think a lot about, when you think transdermally and your skin being your largest organ and how powerful she is as a kind of an encapsulation of self, and what you put on her matters. Are there ingredients that obviously you formulate with them, but you're like, this is it, this is the one, these are the ones that you have to look for when you're looking for these types of products? Well, absolutely no is anything that's petroleum derived. In the EU, they've already banned petroleum products like Vaseline for lip care. And it's the same tissue on the vulva because it causes cancer. So that would be the first thing that I would say. And also, if you understand the tissue is 10 times more absorbent than any other tissue in the body, it becomes even more important. And I would say, depending on the product, like when I was formulating the arousal serum, I was looking at stuff from, we have a farm, Eco Village Farm in Hawaii. And we were looking at what was in use by Pacific Islanders. And someone brought me a tiny little flower called Spilanthes acmella. And they said, bite the head of this flower. This is what native Polynesians use for dental health and sexual arousal. So you bite the flower and your whole mouth starts foaming, lubricating. Your like saliva is pouring out. It's a vasodilator and it brings moisture from underneath the mucous membranes to the surface.
and it tingles, and it's got a little numbing thing. And so investigating that plant, that became the core ingredient in our arousal serum, along with a few other things like a little derivative, the Sichuan pepper and stuff like that. So that when I offer that product, I offer it with also do squats, do hip circles, do self massage, find the pressure points, because so much of staying moisturized is blood flow. And I would say, we found a couple of proprietary blends that are based on German chamomile and some other things that are shown over time to build up tissue, to replenish the density of tissue. That's an example. Or Schisandra or Centella asiatica. These are all things that have deep studies against them on, like if you use Centella asiatica, about 8 weeks in, you'll notice a 33% increase in skin density.
Wow.
That's coming from cutometers. So we really went with traditional stuff, but then identified the research studies that could support it, and then did lab tests of our own.
That's amazing. Okay, final question here towards the stretch. Top menopause must-haves, and you have this on your website. So I love this. For the ladies who are listening, what do they need? What are your, like, don't leave this conversation without going and getting these products?
It's so funny, like I am so bad about the products, because the first thing I wanted to say was like, don't leave this conversation without reframing how you think about menopause and aging.
Yeah.
Like that it's the freest period of your life. You have a shift in your baseline hormones, and that's going to create a whole new stability. You're probably done, or at least getting close to being done, raising a family, and that all of the stories of what it's like to be mid-50s and later are utterly false. The new book, which is The 9 Lives of Women, actually takes and breaks down the 3 stages after active menopause into 3 distinct biological stages, and tells you what you can expect even there. And I discovered in the research something called gerotranscendence, that in the last ninth of life, so many elders are experiencing a transcendent and beautiful thing, even though you'd never know that by looking at the outside. And it also contains like what it would take to be the happiest elder possible. Biological stack and the attitude of like where to focus your time and attention and how to live. So that's all research based. And then I, of course, would say you cannot leave home without a moisturizer, vulvovaginal moisturizer that is plant-based. For us, that's Honor Balm. I think the body oil, like something that helps with all of the weird stuff that's going on in the skin, is also in that category. I would say if you haven't explored, and this is not one of our products, but if you haven't explored hormonal supplements, you might look at HRT, the patches from Winona, who I think is also working with you. And I am a big believer in peptides. I use the subcutaneous peptide BPC 157 for skin and bones and joints. And a little talked about thing is how, we were supposed to die at 65. Throughout human history, you would hit menopause, you would have 10 years as a grandmother, and you would die.
And then it's out.
Yeah. And now you have 30 more years. Congratulations. Don't live it without hormones and support for your joints and bones. So yeah, and you can come over and like find everything we make is stuff that we use ourselves. My daughter is the president of the company now. She's 38 and she's amazing. Samantha, we love you.
Good job,
and
Mom.
It's really interesting to like be in a joint relationship with her. She also has a very big commitment to herbs and quality, and lives sort of half her life in the garden. And I think that's it's we bring that into our ethos with everything we're doing. So come on over and check it out.
By the way, so I grew up in Hawaii on the Big
Oh,
Island.
you did?
Yeah.
We're on the
So
Big
I
Island.
feel
What?
like maybe one of my cousins is definitely growing your herbs and plants, and probably noni and some maki. I mean, all that stuff.
9 years ago, we decided to, when the youngest child left for college or left to finish college, we decided to buy this property and try to build an idealistic utopian eco-village.
Yeah.
And it is like the subject of a sitcom now. It's just everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. But we do grow beautiful. It's 70% food sustainable at this point, and all off grid. But I would say noni is another. Noni and fern medicine are get very little exposure on the mainland, and those are other things to look into. I made for Rosebud Woman a kava gummy
Oh, interesting.
that is, if anybody has had kava, it's a legal plant, which is important to know, that deals with systemic inflammation, social anxiety, anxiety in general in the system. But it's very, let's just say it's an acquired taste.
Yes.
And so we blend it with island
Oh,
mango
okay.
and island cane sugar and make it in a USDA organic certified kitchen outside of Hilo.
Oh, nice.
And so all locally grown, we know all the growers. It's only waka root, so it has no hepatotoxicity. And that was in response to the question of how do I relax and how do I not be in pain? So those gummies are also available on the site.
That's amazing. Well, I am so grateful that you took your time this morning
Thank
from
you.
the East Coast to do this. And we have loved your products. We love what you're doing. We love, I think, the holistic approach and having this open arm and open heart empowerment for women just is so aligned with shared mission on our end. And we're so grateful for everything that you are doing.
I
So,
feel that from you. I mean, really, it's such beautiful work that education and inspiration together do it. So thank you. Thanks
yeah.
for doing what you're doing, particularly on
And
Perry, which I think has gotten a lot less information and it's less identifiable. So the more you can tell people about that, the better.
I think it's increasingly challenging. I think it's the world that we live in. I think it's the platforms that we use. And I think that women need to be empowered to make their own decisions, back to self
Yeah,
autonomy and saying, I'm going to ingest this information. I'm going to
yeah,
understand that this is,
yeah,
a lens and a truth, but I then want to take it and go action it for
yes,
myself. And I think the other thing that Stacey and I talk about all the time is the world right now is so polar and that's so divisive, where it can be a yes and you can use honor balm and you can be on HRT. You can
that's right.
go take progesterone and you can also do Ayurvedic medicine. You can believe in your sense of, there's so many things that I think that women feel like they have to make a choice
Yeah.
or an either or. And so much of the approach that we believe will just make you stronger is a yes and. And you don't
I could
have
talk to you all
to.
day about this because that thing that there are no taboos, nothing's outside of, there's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
Become inwardly referential, and decide at what level you want to intervene. Some women decide just to go completely natural and not intervene at all and like breathe into their symptoms. And some are like, give me everything. And that's really an inner journey. I love that we are ending on this.
Yeah.
And if you ever want to talk again, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you for everything. We're so grateful for you.
Me too.
Like water
Okay. Take
for
care.
chocolate. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.